Hello everyone, myself Sonia Rani. I welcome you on this seventh live session of the course Solar Photovoltaics Fundamentals, Technology and Application. I hope that these sessions are helping you to solve the assignment problems. And we are on time, so let's start the today's session. So here is your first question. So let me take this pen. So the first question is, the size and the chemical bonding in the organic nanoparticle is measured by the respectively. So the one technique is used for measuring the size of the nanoparticle and the other one is used for measuring the to find out the chemical bonding, the type of the chemical bonding. So the options are your FTIR, DLS, FTIR, ICP and DLS and ICP and XRD. So the dynamic light scattering, which is your DLS, basically it is a kind of scattering or the technique which is also known as the photon correlation spectroscopy. So basically what we do, we take a solution. So the Brownian motion of the molecules in a solution that arises due to the bombardment from the solvent molecules can be related to the motion of to the size of the particle. Means if we have this kind of solution, okay, so the Brownian motion of the particles, which is basically due to the bombardment from the solvent molecules. So this thing can be related to the size in determining the size of the particle. So that means for your calculating the size of the nanoparticle, the technique which is generally used is your dynamic light scattering, which is basically your DLS technique. Okay. The second technique is your Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. So in this type of technique, basically the infrared spectrum of the absorption or the emission of the solid, liquid and gas can be taken out, and this is basically used to find out the type of functional group can be identified using FTIR. FTIR. So the question was, which technique is used to find the size and the chemical bonding. So for the size, this DLS technique is used, and for the chemical bonding to find out the type of the functional group, so this FTIR, which is your Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, is used. The other two techniques here which are written are the ICP and the XRD. ICP and the XRD. So basically your ICP stand for inductively coupled plasma technique, and this XRD stand for X-ray diffraction technique. So basically this method is used to detect the elements to analyze to analyze analyze the chemical sample, whereas XRD, which is a very informative technique that is used to determine or to study the crystal structure of the material. So one more important thing about the XRD is that it is a non-destructive experimental technique. Now, by non-destructive experimental technique, I mean to say that suppose that this is your sample and you do the XRD. So it is not like that this sample will be destroyed or decayed or anything will happen to this sample. After taking the measurement or if you take the data, then you can simply recover your sample after measuring this using this XRD, which is your X-ray diffraction technique. So for this question, the option number second, which is the DLS technique, is used for measuring the size of the organic nanoparticle, and the FTIR, which is nothing but your Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, that is used for the finding the chemical bond or the type of the functional group mainly for the organic nanoparticles. Okay, so next question is the diffusion length of the charge carrier is defined as what? So suppose that LD is representing as the diffusion length. So we need to find out that what will be the relation between the diffusion length, temperature, mobility, tau, which is your free time, and Q, which is your charge. So we know the relation between diffusion length am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we know the relation between the diffusion length and the mean free time, which can be written as, suppose LD is your diffusion length, it is written as square root of D into tau, which is where D is your diffusion coefficient and tau is the lifetime. We can also say it like this. Okay. And we also know the relation which relates the diffusion coefficient D, which is your mu kt divided by q, where mu is the mobility of the charge carrier, and k is your Boltzmann constant. T is temperature, Q is the charge. Okay, so when we will suppose that this is your equation number 1 and this is your equation number 2. Now on putting the value from equation number 2 to equation number 1, what we will get, here we were having length or the diffusion length equals to square root of d, which is your diffusion coefficient. So when we'll put all these values, so it will give us mu kt divided by q multiplied by tau, or we can also rewrite this relation as square root of kt. We can write it separately. In bracket we can take mu times of tau and divided by q. So this is the relation between the diffusion length. This is the relation for calculating the diffusion length. So among these options, let's see which one is the correct answer. So here it is showing the kt out of this square root, so it is the wrong answer. The third one is also not the correct answer. The fourth one is also not the correct answer. So option number second is the correct relation for this diffusion length of charge carrier. Diffusion length of charge carriers. So is this clear to everyone? If it is clear, you can write the yes in the chat box. Okay. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is the band gap of the titanium oxide? So band gap you have to tell in terms of electron volt. So it is your 1.56 eV, 1.1 electron volt, 1.17 electron volt, or 3.20 electron volt. So when we are talking about the band gap of the material, so in the material which are having the molecular orbital, we generally talk about the molecular orbital. So we generally talk about the HOMO level and the LUMO level. HOMO level is nothing but your highest occupied molecular orbital, and LUMO is your lowest unoccupied molecular orbital. Molecular orbital, or we can also relate it in terms of band, which is basically your conduction band, or the distance between this separation between this the valence band and the conduction band is your defines your band gap of the material, which is generally represented by Eg, E suffix Z. So for the materials for the materials like perovskite, perovskite, so they have the band gap approximately equal to 1.56 electron volt, nearly equivalent to 1.56 electron volt. So can anyone can tell me that which perovskite is having the band gap near to this value? You can write your answer in the chat box. Anyone? Okay, so Naman, that is correct. The answer for this question is, you are saying very correct. But I am asking that which perovskite is having a band gap value approximately equivalent to 1.5 or 1.6 electron volt. Yeah, so Manu Prada has said the right answer. So yeah, okay. So what is the, which is your MAPBI3 which is your methyl ammonium lead iodide. So this material is having a band gap in this range. So here we have asked for the titanium oxide. So titanium oxide is having a band gap value near to 3.2 electron volt. So option number 4, which is your this one, this is the correct answer for this question. So Naman, you were right. Option D is the correct answer for this question. And for these two options, which is showing the band gap value near 1.1 or 1.17 electron volt. So can anyone can tell me any material which is having the band gap value near 1.2 to 1.4 electron volt or in between this range? Because there are certain materials which are having various advantage in terms of optics application. So can anyone can tell me any material which is having the band gap value near to this range? Anyone? You can write your answer in the chat box. Okay. Okay. So you might have heard about the materials like lithium fluoride and the magnesium fluoride. So what are the advantages of these materials? So basically these materials are used as the anti-reflective coating. So these materials are very useful for the purpose of when you are fabricating a solar cell. So in case of the solar cell, you have a multi-layer stack. So suppose this is your front transparent electrode, which is your ITO, then followed by some ETL, then your perovskite or any active layer, light absorbing layer. Then you will be having your HTL, which is hole transporting layer, and finally at the end there is some metal contact. So by depositing a thin layer of this anti-reflection coating, which can be your lithium fluoride or MgF2, you can actually enhance the amount of light, which can enhance the amount of light entering your device. So is this clear to everyone? The application of this lithium fluoride and MgF2? Okay. So I have a question that if these coatings are going to increase the amount of light which is entering the device architecture, so what effect will it have on the device performance? Whether it will decrease the device performance or whether it will increase the device performance? You can write your answer in the chat box. Any idea, anyone? Increase. Okay. Naman is saying increase. Others? Okay. So for sure when the light amount of light which is entering our device is increased, so this light absorbing layer here that will going to absorb the more amount of light, and which in turn will create the more it will generate the more number of exciton, which will finally be created into the charge carrier. So that will be separated from each other, electron and hole, and then they will be carried out in the external circuit following to the outside. So that is going to increase or improve the performance of the device overall. So I think it is clear to everyone. Is it clear? Okay. So now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what are the possible configuration of the tandem solar cell? So this is your 1T, SPT, 3T and all of the above. So 1T is representing here one terminal tandem configuration. SPT is your series parallel configuration, tandem configuration. 3T is your three terminal three terminal configuration, and the fourth option is showing that all are the correct answer. Okay, so let's see this first, see this figure. So the possible tandem configuration are the 4T, which is your four terminal tandem configuration. The second one is your 2T, which is your two terminal tandem configuration. The third one is your SPT. SPT is your basically series parallel tandem configuration, and the last one is your reflective configuration for the tandem application of the solar cell. So the four terminal configuration, so as you can see here in the figure, so it comprises of the top and the bottom cells. So this one is the top cell, this one is the bottom cell, and that are independently connected. So these are having the connection from here to here and from here to here. So you can see they are four terminal these. So that's why we are calling it as the four terminal tandem solar cell configuration. In this two terminal solar cell configuration, you can see that the first perovskite top cell and the bottom one are connected through a recombination layer which is in between the both, and there are only two terminals for the output. For the series parallel tandem configuration, as you can see here in this figure, so this combine the string of the top and the bottom cells separately before connection of the voltage match string in the parallel, providing it a practical method for combining the two cell power output at the similar performance to 4T configuration in the annual energy yield. So as you can see here, this string is basically connecting this. This is the string which is basically used to connect this bottom and the top perovskite cell, and the last one is your reflective tandem configuration. So when the light incident on this solar cell, it get reflected and the remaining light get to this bottom tandem solar cell, so which in turn will going to give you the some energy or the output. So out of these four option, you can see that there is no one terminal configuration, so this one option is eliminated. There is no also three terminal configuration, so option number 3 is also get eliminated. There is this configuration which is your SPT, which is nothing but your series parallel tandem configuration. So option number 2 is the right answer for this question. So is this clear? If it is clear, you can write yes in the chat box. So mainly you need to remember or memorize the what are the possible tandem configuration we can have. So this is your 4T, 4 terminal, 2 terminal, SPT, which is your series parallel terminal, and the last one is your reflective configuration. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, where is the PL peak in the FAPBI3 perovskite single crystal? So if you can see here, for the FFPBI3 single crystal, The PL spectra is given here in this inset of the figure. As you can find out from clearly that the peak of this PL spectra is around 820 nanometer. So option number 1 is the correct answer for this question. For the PL peak of the single crystal of this FAPPBI3, which we have just seen, it is around 820 nanometer. But for the thin film of this FAPPBI3, the PL peak is around 805 nanometer. And you can also remember the carrier lifetime of the both, means for the single crystal of the FAPPBI3. So these are all for the FAPPBI3 single crystal and the thin film of the FAPPBI3. Okay, so option number 1 is the correct answer for this question. So now let's move on to the next question. The next question is the inverse temperature crystallization method of the single crystal growth is based on the concept of what? So when you are talking about the inverse temperature crystallization method, so what happens? You are having a solvent. So the solvent is something like that. If the temperature increases, the solubility increases. Okay, so what we can say, if or on lowering the temperature, on lowering the temperature, the solubility will decrease, and which in turn will lead to the formation of small single crystals, small single crystals of the material. So this slow cooling method, or we can say it as the inverse temperature crystallization method, is one of the technique which we can use for the fabrication of this single crystal of perovskites. Generally we can say can be fabricated using the slow cooling or the inverse temperature crystallization technique. So what is happening here, if you increase the temperature, then the solubility decreases. On increasing the temperature, the solubility increases. So now let's check the option. The first option is the solubility increases with increasing the temperature. The solubility decreases with increasing the temperature. Solubility remains constant during the change in temperature, and the none of the above. So option number 1 is the correct option. So now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, in the transition flow, the mean free path to the characteristic dimension ratio is less than 0.01, it is in between 0.01 and 1, it is greater than 1, and none of the above. So can anyone tell me which one is the correct answer for this question in the transition flow? Anyone? You can write your answer in the chat box, please. Okay. So for the transition flow, for the transition flow, the ratio between the mean free path to characteristic dimension characteristic dimension is in between zero point 0.01 and 1. So option number 2 is the correct option answer for this question, which is your option number B. Okay, so now let's go to the next question. So what is the theoretical efficiency limit for the tandem solar cell? So I'm showing you here a graph. So now you have to tell me that what will be the possible maximum theoretical efficiency limit for the tandem solar cell using this graph. Anyone can tell me, please? You can write your answer in the chat box. Manupradha, you can. Okay. So if you okay, so actually I am asking for this tandem solar cell configuration. So she is saying 22, which is option number B. Others? Okay, so Naman is saying 47. Okay, so Naman, your answer is correct. It is the 47%. So basically, see, tandem configuration are what? Tandem configuration are what? In the tandem configuration, what we basically do, we have a solar cell. So we call it as the top cell. Okay, and we also having another solar cell which we call it as the bottom cell. So no doubt when this light incident on this top, so it can be in any configuration as we have seen. It can be your 4 terminal, it can be your 2 terminal, it can be in your SPT configuration, and even it can be in your reflective configuration. So when the light incident on this solar cell, so what amount of light it get absorbed by the top cell, so what actually not absorbed by the top cell is transmitted through this top cell and will be here for the second solar cell to be get absorbed. So say if we compare a tandem configuration with a single any solar cell, so this is your solar cell and this is material is having a band gap say 1.5 electron volt, which is your MAPI. Okay, so the wavelength, the cutoff wavelength is around 780 nanometer. So that means it is going to absorb everything which is less than 780 nanometer and is going to transmit the everything which is above this wavelength range. But at the same time, if I put another solar cell which is capable of absorbing the transmitted light from this solar cell, so that then in that case it is going to enhance the device performance. So for no doubt we can say that the efficiency limit for the tandem solar cell is something which will be on the higher limit. Okay, so among these we can see that 47% is the maximum value, or you can also see from the graphs that from around 47% is the maximum theoretical efficiency limit for this 4 terminal tandem solar cell. So this 47 is for the tandem solar cell. And what will be the tandem solar cell? What will be the theoretical efficiency limit for this, or we can say the Shockley-Queisser limit, SQ limit for the single junction perovskite solar cell? Anyone? You can write your answer in the chat box. this SQ limit, which is your Shockley-Kissel limit for the single junction solar cell? Anyone? Okay. So that point you have to note down 37. Naman is saying 37. Okay. Others? So basically it is around 33.4 something. So for this question, for the tandem solar cell configuration, the theoretical efficiency limit is your 47%, which is your option number 3. So now let's move on to the next question. So the question is, which among the following material is used as the HTM in the perovskite solar cell? So what is your HTM? HTM is your hole transporting material. Hole transporting material. Now what are these hole transporting material? So basically these are the material which are favorable for the flow of holes, and at the same time block or resist the motion of electrons. Okay, so as the name itself, it's suggesting the hole transporting material, so which is suitable for the hole suitable, so that is your hole transporting layer, or we can also say it like the hole transporting layer or the hole transporting material. Similar to this, we also have the electron transporting layer or the ETM, which is your electron transporting material. So these are the material which are suitable for the flow of electrons and block or resist the motion of holes. Okay, so here are some given materials which you can see. So among these, you have to tell that which one of the following is the HTM, which is your hole transporting layer in the perovskite solar cell. So anyone can tell. You can write your answer in the chat box if you have any idea. Anyone? Okay, so Naman is saying P.PSS. Very good. Okay. Manuprada is also saying A. Okay, so everyone is saying A. Yes, option number 1. Okay. Yes. So option number 1, which is your P.PSS, is a famous or popularly known hole transporting layer, whereas rest of these, which are your TiO2, titanium dioxide, and SnO2, yes, SnO2 and ZnO, all are the electron transporting layers, all are the ETLs. So basically these are the inorganic ETL. There can be your organic ETLs as well. Organic ETLs just like PCBM. Okay. So is this clear to everyone? If it is clear, you can write yes in the chat box. Okay. So now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is the dependency of the binding energy on the dielectric constant of the material? Okay. So the relation between the binding energy binding energy and the dielectric constant is something like, if suppose the binding energy is representing by this value, so it is kind of inversely proportionality between this dielectric constant. So if there is a material which is having high dielectric constant, so that means the binding energy is small or low. That means easily the charge carriers can be separated from the exciton condition. Okay, so option number 3, which is your showing this value, so this is your right answer for this question. So is this clear to everyone? So there is an inversely proportionality between the binding energy. Yeah, okay. So thank you. This is all for today's session. I hope that you like this session. So all that this video will be uploaded on the YouTube channel. If you have any doubt in any question, then you can also post your doubt in the comment box on the YouTube channel. So we will make sure that we can clarify all your doubts. So thank you for today's. Thank you. So you can leave now.